The bridge that the Romans built. They blew up the Thames, the river narrowed, they found the gravel beds where they could put down the timbers, piers they're called, and then they have a bridge that controls both sides of the country. And it's a port because they're going to have people coming in and coming out. That was why the original inhabitants never bothered to build it. But who were these original inhabitants? We're preparing you for a trip to England and to understand what you see when you get there. And then the learning is redoubled. It comes back. It all becomes real. You're also, when you go there, very quickly, going to go to Stonehenge. It's not a big country, and Stonehenge is just outside of London. It's not just outside, but it's an easy day's trip. What's more, the trip that take one of the bus trips. The trip will also give you the beautiful cathedral at Salisbury, where they've kept one of the 3 intact copies of Magna Carta. It'll show you the beautiful Constable country. The painter John Constable immortalized it, and it's become like a national trust, all the lovely rivers. And then coming back, they'll even stop at the historic town of Bath, where not all, but where a lot of the action in Jane Austen takes place. You really feel, it's beautifully preserved, you really feel like you're in a Jane Austen novel when you're in Bath. So you're going to see Stonehenge. You're going to see Stonehenge. Used to be, thank goodness the English have gotten into it, because it used to be, how many people have been to Stonehenge? How long ago were you there?
1991.
It used to be so uninspiring.
Yeah.
It was, it was right next to a 2-lane highway, or maybe 4-lane. There was no traffic. Maybe it was 2-lane highway. It was just in a field. It was much smaller than you would have expected. It was fenced off. You stood at the fence and you looked at it. There was the tremendous wind that's always blowing out there, and well, that was it. Well, now they've given it the full American Hollywood treatment, and you get to enjoy Stonehenge the way it should be. Now, there are old pictures, by the way. This is a little disappointing, but there are old paintings of Stonehenge, including one by Constable, which show that some of those stones, those enormous stones which are up, they'd fallen down too. These things have been re-erected, so hey, it's show business, right? Okay. But what's really terrific is, on this, I think it's only 26 square miles of national park that they've got there now. Last year, using new super ground radar, they found a gigantic structure buried underground of stones, menhirs, or whatever you want to call them, of those enormous stones that weigh 90 tons or 50 tons, and which had to be dragged there or floated there from quite far away. And it's only 3 kilometers, a mile and a half or so, away from Stonehenge. It got the nickname Superhenge. As a description, yeah, I wrote out the description here. This enormous, and now the stones are underground at the moment. There's this hump, but once it's excavated, it's going to be fantastic. This enormous, simpler site, about 5 football fields across, 5 football fields wide, is an easy walk from Stonehenge. It was built at the same time. It's so close that it's already on the national park land. Nobody has speculated yet, but it has to have been connected with Stonehenge. It was about 200 of these gigantic stones. They go up to 50 tons each, and there are 90 of them which are still standing upright under the ground. So by the time you visit, they will have excavated those things. That is no casual construction. particularly when you can reflect that the places where those stones come from, they can tell from the samples, is hundreds of miles away. And they didn't have any machines. So what I asked you to do was to send me some emails about what you think Superhenge could be. The official name has always been Durrington Walls. And by the way, Wikipedia is terrific on this. Anything that's not controversial and doesn't involve Jews, Wikipedia usually is pretty fair-minded. Those nerds are good. And I mean, really, a lot of the stuff on London is wonderful. You can picture little London nerdy buffs sitting there day and night, adding happily to their knowledge of London. It's something you do when you have too much writer's block to work on your book. You do that instead, and you feel as if you're doing something. So, yes, by all means, look up Stonehenge or the Stonehenge complex. There's a bunch of things, and now we see they were tied together. So I asked for your opinion. Now, here's the thing. Don't be so damn in awe of professors and scholars. You're grown-ups. You've had life experiences. And you've had life experiences that a lot... Haven't you ever looked at one of your English teachers and said, what the hell does she know about sex? I mean, really, I mean, she's reading this poem, and you just... I bet I know more than, you know, she's reading about lust and love, and again, you look at this guy who's doing the Iliad with you, and you say, he never even had a fist fight in his life. And he's talking about Achilles and in this killing rage. Respect yourselves. You've really had an experience. Use your experience. Now, one of the things, like Chio, for instance, now one of the things he knows is partying. So I asked him, and the rest of you in these emails, to apply what you know of festivals to what a festival needs, to what this Superhenge could be about. The proposals that the professors have been making were incredibly naive. Let me read you some of your better ones. What kind of physical facilities do you need to accommodate great crowds coming from very far away to a festival other than a main stage? My proposition was that Stonehenge itself, which we know was a pilgrimage site, and we found all sorts of remains of bodies there. Stonehenge itself was a pilgrimage site, and if you know anything about religion before it was spiritualized, religion was mostly praying to the gods to heal you. Religion and medicine were inextricable. They said, well, Jesus in the Gospel of Mark is mostly an exorcist. Well, it's the same thing as being a doctor. There weren't any germs or anything. You had offended somebody, and you had to make the evil spirit come out of you. Come out of her. And then she was cured. You know, you get the idea. So a lot of really sick people, picture Lourdes. Anybody ever been to Lourdes or one of the pilgrimage sites? I never have either. Not sure I'd want to go even, but I think it would be educational. Where all these poor souls who've given up on everything are taken in their wheelchairs and stretchers, and they're taken to have some of the holy water and hope that a miracle will happen. So, but that would be Stonehenge. You need a place where they're going to land first. I mean, they need ground support, right? And that's what you guys were immediately talking about. For instance, Joel said, large gathering of people. Based on the amount of bones in the area, it makes sense that people traveled to this site are going to need living accommodations. Burning Man is an interesting comparison due to the fact that it is typically out in the middle of nowhere. So accommodations are of something of a greater necessity. And as you know from having seen Stonehenge, it's in the middle of nowhere. Where it pops up, it's as if you were driving down through Kansas and then all of a sudden Stonehenge is in the middle of it. It's rolling hills, tremendous amount of wind blowing the grain around, and then Stonehenge. So there was nothing there. They needed ground support, and you had some great ideas. Where's John Justo? John Christopher Abejo Justo? See, you have to come to class. If I'm going to do something like this and you don't come to class, I know you're not here, and then it's bad for you. Well, we won't do him.
It's me.
Oh, why the hell did you raise your hand?
I was figured you might tell something funny or something about my email.
No, I liked your email terrifically. I almost dropped him from the course, and instead he's sitting here blushing modestly. All right. This is what John said, and I liked it a lot. To accommodate great crowds in a festival, the area has to have restrooms and refreshment areas. People have to have something for their throats. And of course, England gets cold at certain times of year. They're not going to do this just during the solar equinox. You're bringing people there who are dying. So there have to be at least bonfires. Now, what John is proposing is when we excavate, this is what we're going to find. There have to have been bonfires, at least heating equipment to keep the people warm. But on the other hand, if it's too hot, and you've got people, fainting like Hillary Clinton, you need places where they can, unfortunately, I shouldn't make a joke, the poor thing was ill. You need places where they should be cool. It's interesting. The shape of the stones is large and it's huge and it's semicircular. How many have ever seen the Colosseum? The usual suspects. All right.
I was a flight attendant, so.
Oh, all right. So you've seen everything.
Yeah.
You and the dog. All right. So the dog's asleep. I hope I'm doing okay. The dog. It'll get better. Tough dog. Anyway, the Colosseum. Well, you know what the Colosseum looks like. It's round. But what you don't know is they've been able to reconstruct from holes in the roof, in the ceiling of it, you might say, that there used to be a tremendous awning that went over half of the Colosseum, the vellum as it was called. Because, I mean, you're broiling there in the Roman sun. You pay a little extra and you get the awning over you. Now, these stones are so close together, it is possible that they could have supported awnings in addition to, we haven't excavated them yet, in addition to whatever else they were doing there. They look like they could prop up, even against that wind. That's right. And I just said, there's always that tremendous wind. It's got to be some kind of windbreak. Now you've got the stones. Maybe there was wood between the stones. You see, it isn't like the professors know everything. It's all up for grabs. In more ways than you know, in more places than you know. These stones are fairly close together. If you put just wood there, it would blow down, it would rot out. It's a wet country. Stones aren't going to rot out. And some stones that heavy, you could get a lot of wood in between. You could make pavilions. At least you'd have a windbreak, and you could have the awning over it. And John said, just like in Disneyland, also, it has to have boundaries. Festivals do have walls. There's an entrance gate to get in and out. I think that's true. There's a little structure there, which I don't know what the hell the little structure is doing, but it's near where the river runs to the mouth of it. The wall is on the windward side. The little structure is probably a guardhouse or a gatehouse where you get checked in some way. What do you think? Any ideas? Any speculation from what you know? It's a Burning Man situation, middle of no place, yeah.
And they could have like tents or designated areas, kind of like a campsite. Even though everybody brings their own stuff, there's certain sections or areas where you set up, has to be some way to organize that. It could have been somebody who says, okay, well, you have section A1, that's where you guys are going to be.
That's interesting. If you have more money, you can book ahead. No, you'd have to. I mean, you have a little more money. Do you, well, look,
Be closer to
do
the
you want to sit in
bonfire,
the
better to-
bleachers, or do you want a place where you're out of the wind and you're, you know, can you afford it? Maybe even a place where there's so-called medical help because your relative is almost dead. Any other ideas? What else do you have to have? I've got some good ideas here. Ariam, what do you think? Does that sound right to you? Have you ever been to Burning Man or? No? What about just general rock festival things? There's got to be there's got to be porta potties, right? Lots of them. But also people are going to die there, a lot of them. So there have to be ways to cremate the bodies or at least to bury bones. You're not going to put them on a boat and try to ship them back to wherever they came from. This is holier ground than where they came from, too. Okay, I'm getting a picture. And for the real healing, the miracle to take place, after they've landed, after they're set up, you walk the 3 kilometers over to Stonehenge, and there are the druids, the priests, who do whatever they do and accept your, well, of course, they accept your donations, and then they ask for gods to take some, and like that. But it's just far enough so you don't have to see the bodies, you don't have to smell the campfires. There's a feeling of holiness about the place. Azada, where are you? Ah. And you also said there's got to be a designated bathroom area. There's usually room for people to roam around and socialize, as well as an area designated for people to set up camp or a sleeping area. At festivals, there's also oftentimes tents set up where people can sell their goods and guests can buy souvenirs. Absolutely, these are normal people. They've got the River Avon full of fish. People have to eat. How are they going to keep the fishermen out? Wanting to sell at double price all the fish to these tourists, essentially. Pilgrimages always were big business like that. If you've ever been to a place like Nazareth, my God, all the souvenirs and magic this and that. I have a little bag of dirt from Nazareth, which is written on it, "Genuine Holy Land Earth, signed by the Christian resident." You actually buy the dirt and bring it back. So there's probably all sorts of little shops and stores. And what makes it even more plausible is these people are Indo-European and they're kin to the Greeks. I know it may seem like a stretch, but to the early Greeks of that era, we're going to talk about who the Indo-Europeans were. And the main Greek healing festival took place, the festival of Asclepius, not festival, the site at Epidaurus. And it was so popular that it acquired theaters and places for games, and as it is said, all this kind of support stuff that goes along with a popular attraction where lots of people set up and lots of other people see a little money to be made. And after all, you got to amuse them while they're there. So, at least the kids. There's evidence of how old it is in the fact, and I'm ending this before we go to our break, in the fact that the river, which goes right by the entrance to Superhenge, which looks like they floated everybody in, and then curves around, the river is called the Avon. And you'll notice there, it's a familiar word. Shakespeare lived in Stratford-on-Avon, and there are 2 other Avon rivers. But you get a sense of the antiquity. Avon isn't English. Avon is Celtish. It's really old. And all Avon means is river. That's why there's so many Avons. So this is a really old place. And we're still figuring out what the heck it is. I have to, before I end, let me scan forward here to one of the summations of, what did I do with it here? A lot of people had very good things. Oh, someone said, what about all the blood feuds between the clans that were going on? The Kenny and all those guys? They probably had to be segregated into different areas. In Greece, they did that. You know, whenever there was an Olympics, everybody had to have a temporary truce so that they could go and compete against each other in the games. But they had to be segregated. J.T. Levangie, where is that? Multiple altars for prayers. Yeah, we're forgetting. These are monotheists. You know, one God. There isn't one altar. There's all sorts of different altars for all sorts of different gods. You don't know who has sent this plague down on your relatives. There's got to be all sorts of space for that. And again, we're starting to understand why this Superhenge had to be 5 football fields wide. I mean, you just saw opening day, the Super Bowl games. You know how big one of those stadiums is. This thing's 5 times that size. And surrounded by these gigantic stones, which they assembled without their damn technology worth a damn either. It's amazing. You would need different, yeah. He says, JT says, expect to find the bones of both beast and man when they unearth it. Nicole, where's Nicole Town? And she mentions, what about a parking lot? That might sound funny, but yes, they had carts. Sick people could have been brought there on ox carts. It sounds funny, but in some of these places, we notice there are gigantic parking lots for the carts. And here's just a summation from Therese McKenna. In order to support a festival, ending with this and read, that attracts large numbers of people, you need an infrastructure similar to that of a small, portable town. The infrastructure must support transportation to and from the event, as well as sewage, garbage management, food, drink for purchase, merchandise, souvenirs, first aid area. I propose that was one of the uses of the smaller Stonehenge at first, and then as it got popular, they needed the big place. She calls it first Smallhenge. I believe that Smallhenge was used for religious and healing purposes. And then after a while, as it got famous and accumulated so many people, they had to expand. It just makes sense. I would guess that we're going, and what's more, she says, if you know anybody who's descended from the Celts, for instance, the Irish, you'll know that sport and competition are in their blood. We're going to find like places for competition nearby. We will find evidence of food and drink being sold and consumed, bones of animals and such scattered with broken horn cups that people drank from. Excavation will also reveal a series of large pits used as outhouses to serve the sewage needs of the masses. We would expect the outhouses to be built away from the main event, from Stonehenge, but I'm not so sure the Druids would do so. They didn't have the knowledge of disease that we do, and they were used to living with odors we find distasteful. The river brought in participants and spectators to the games, and it might have been fenced off. We'll find bonfires. Wealthy spectators may have stayed in the town instead of camping, like those who purchased VIP tickets at one of the festivals. So all the normal human needs and desires, sewage, garbage, souvenirs, fun, funerals, would all have to be taken care of. When you go to Stonehenge then, if you're on the tour or something, break away and get over to Superhenge and be one of the last people to see it before it's fully excavated. Chio, you could go at night and dig, maybe find something valuable, you know, okay. All right. thank you for being my straight man on this. I appreciate it a lot. He's done that before in other classes. Okay, and now another cultural predisposition. Jews always do business over food. So now we break for cuisine. But remember, you do not go out in the hall and call your boyfriend. You have to introduce yourselves to each other, make conversation, talk about England. It's okay, guys, you're not hitting on the girls, it's all right. Just talk to each other, please, and we'll get the food set up. Thank you, Joel, for recording.